It's the 20th edition of Nigerian Economic Summit. Welcome to Business Incorporated, right from the venue of the summit. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwagu. Well, this year's summit is focused majorly on education with the theme, Transforming Education Through Partnerships for Global Competitiveness. Now, everyone seems to be talking about job creation, inclusive growth, as well as bridging the inequality gap in Nigeria. How can we achieve all of these through proper education? That's our focus on this week's edition of the program. Thank you for staying tuned. It is popularly said that a well and strong educated population is key to sustainable national development and competitiveness in the global economy. And that is why we have these number of people gathered here from all walks of life to deliberate on how to make Nigeria's education sector work better. Although this year's summit came earlier than usual, it attracted dignitaries from all walks of life. First, to draw attention to the fact that Nigeria do have a problem with its education system, identify the capacity to effect change, and come up with a structure on how to move the sector forward.
We at the Nigeria Economic Summit Group believe it is time to undertake a fundamental review of our education system and sector. Our institutions at all levels are producing graduates not fit for purpose. In other words, our children are leaving school without the skills required to sustain them or contribute to the growth and development of the national economy. The challenge of inadequate human capital is becoming the biggest challenge of all. We must face our education system with passion and vigor, and do so as a collective objective between the public and the private sectors. Each cannot do it adequately alone. In addition to the deficit in jobs created relative to new entrants, the quality of labor poses a major challenge. While improvements in the business and economic environment will go a long way towards recreating jobs, the new challenge we face will then be whether there are enough suitably skilled Nigerians to take up the jobs being created.
And then the plenaries began with a presidential dialogue to discuss the policies of government, the challenges, and the way forward.
Education has been put as the key factor of the development of this country and for the achievement of our transformation agenda, such that Nigeria will be among the most 20 developed nations by the year 2020. The transformation for the achievement of this objective, as you are aware, the Presidential Task Team on Education has come up with guidelines, and implementation has been going on. And the way we are going now is in the right direction, so that we will be able to achieve that objective, that we have students that are passing out of our various levels of education to participate in the development of this country.
Let me just start from the tertiary level, because we also talk about funding, and I'm happy Mr. Alex has said that money alone cannot solve problems. Take, for example, in the tertiary institutions, the universities. Is it that the lecturers are not well paid, and that's why they are producing not good graduates? Is it because there are no incentives for them? That's why there is so much corruption? Who are these people producing these bad graduates? So it is not merely payment of money.
In all, there were 7 plenaries, and the ultimate goal is to identify key strategies that can be implemented in the next 1 year to redress the decline of the education sector and set Nigeria on the right path. However, how these suggestions are implemented will determine the future of the education sector in Nigeria. We will take a short break now, and when we return, I will be speaking with our business development consultant and the president, Nigeria-Britain Association, Mr. Tunde Arugomati. Do stay with us. Welcome back. So how can we make our educational sector better to work for the growth of the economy and sustainable development? I'm now being joined by a business development consultant and the President's Nigeria-Britain Association, Mr. Tunde Arugu-Martin. Glad to have you on the program.
Thank you very much.
Right. Now, transforming education through partnership for global competitiveness. Could this discussion have come anytime better than now?
I'm very surprised that the government has a lot of initiatives that is already on ground. It's been earmarked in terms of finances, in terms of laws, especially this enhancement initiative for teachers to give them new incentives, to really position them in society so that they'll be properly respected for professionals, which they really are. You and I are products of very dedicated teachers who spent their lives giving their best, transferring knowledge, which is a very important part of any society. Any society that cannot transfer knowledge, cannot improve on the processing capacity of its individuals, is not worth its salt. So, but the interesting thing is that, having said that, the tendency is for most of the delivery agents, as in the ministers and the ministry and everything, to concentrate more on the monetary or budgetary parts, banding figures, the trillions and things. And from what we've seen, especially from one or two things we've seen from other countries, even the United States and stuff on the No Child is Left Behind fiasco and things, we can see that what is really necessary is a systemic approach which puts the right things in the right places at the right time and sorts out the element of having quality players, especially the teachers, quality administrators, and having a system or platform whereby they can interact from time to time to exchange ideas, information on how to move forward, and also the element of not being stagnant and also at the same time not having continuity. Let me give you, from one thing also we've seen from some of the examples from other nations is that why some of these systems are not working because they're stagnant. The United States system, for instance, seems to be stuck in the 40s, right? We have over time tinkered around with ours. Well, one thing we got stuck with, or we seem to have balanced out with, is the 6-3-3-4 system, which in essence and in theory works perfectly well, whereby you start out your primary education for 6 years, middle school for 3 years, and after middle school going to higher school, then you choose the academic or the technical or the artsy, if you want, the artistic end of creative industries and things. And we can see that having not run that, and because of the mentality, prevalent mentality of everybody must go to university, must have a degree, must be a doctor, must be a lawyer, and things like that, we have lost out on artisans, quality artisans. We bring in artisans from Ghana, from Cotonou, from neighboring African countries that have established artisan programs. And I think it's about time we sat down and put our priorities in order and started sorting things out right away.
Now, I know we used to have these vocational schools, technical schools, and you did mention, the quality of teachers we have. I remember we used to have teachers training colleges. Now, those things don't seem to exist. Why?
Yes, because the policies have been somersaulting and generally been, just directionless. For instance, you have a situation where teacher training certificates are being compared with OND, with HND, with bachelor's programs, with master's programs. All of them have different intents or purposes, right? If, like you rightly said, at the basic level of education, you need people who have gone through proper teacher training processes, who have probably what we used to call the NC. I don't know if it still exists, because everybody seems to want to turn their colleges of education into universities, which is not really necessary, because it's not the name or nomenclature that matters, it's what you deliver, and if you can get the service orientation that's necessary to deliver the goods at the level optimally, then that's what to consider. I think it's high time we all sat down again, probably, and I'm sure that's one of the things we're going to take away from here, like the Honorable Vice President said. I hope the government will, there's really, from the presidential session was very frank, brutally frank, it may have been, but we came out with some things that of course, we also must take out of the talking realm, the talk shop realm into implementation.
Funding has been identified as one major challenge of this sector. Well, a lot of people here also believe that it's not all about the monetary aspect of it, but we still agree that funding is very paramount. Now, how do we go about this issue of funding?
First thing first, I think every major player also has to realize the responsibility. Government has over the years seemed to have confused corporate social responsibility with the private-public partnership, to the extent that everything now seems to be, oh, it's the private sector's got to do this. The government has some basic responsibility. It's got to face its responsibility. It's got to know that you have to, first of all, the environment, the policy making, everything has to be consistent. You also have to ensure that the basic infrastructure which you're supposed to provide is there. Your basic funding streams have to be properly sorted out, and you should also make sure that the funds go to the right places. Then you can start thinking of private funding. You can start, yes, I agree with the argument that education should not be free. Education costs money. But you see, you could also have situations whereby if you have a very good public system, for instance, you could actually get people who have good means to come in, pay fees, and then the states and various local governments and everything can now find funding streams to give bursaries, to give scholarships, to make sure that as many people as are in the class that are not so well-to-do attend school. That is, to the extent that as many people as possible go to school and can afford it at the best level obtainable at public school level. And then we can now start talking of private sector coming in to help with infrastructure development for maybe the more specialist schools, school academies, and also to help banks, for instance, should have funds, special funds, probably also with aid agencies backing them, low interest for private schools. That's the way they can help. It's not just that dumping money into the system. You could also have the private schools that will also cater to a certain segment of the society, and that way, and then you can also have all kinds of universities. You can have specialist technical colleges, all being funded on private sector. But the government has a minimal level of responsibility. It definitely has to live up to. And the most important thing is for government to realize this and live up to their responsibility.
And you mentioned the fact that quality education, is not cheap. It is very expensive. Now we're talking about partnership, and then where you have private sector putting their investment into education. How affordable do you think quality education would be, considering the inequality gap in Nigeria? How many people do you think that can actually afford this quality of education we're talking about?
Well, to the extent of 100% affordability from the end of the parents, I'm sure that mostly, well, it's just unfortunately, I would not want to give to, but they're going to be the majority. Those who cannot really afford quality education are going to be the majority. I do not have figures on my fingertips now, but the Bureau of Statistics can do it. But the truth is that, having said that, there are new mechanisms we develop on this. Like somebody, it was also said at the closing presidential session, every one of us, really those, most of the attendees here are the elite group. We have foundations all over the world that put money into education, Ford Foundations of this world, Rocky of this world, the Rockefeller Foundation, another foundation. We could have innovative systems whereby people and CSR from various companies, the oil sector, banking sector, pool in resources whereby create some kind of innovative, I can't think of it right now, but funding streams whereby the indigent, so to speak, students can benefit from one way or the other through subsidies. But the subsidies, yes, might not really reflect on government, but and also infrastructure development to an extent, alma mater associations and things like that. They can help one way or the other. But like I said again earlier, government just definitely has to make sure that the underlying infrastructural responsibility is in place.